Hello, my name is Ben Walker and I'm working today with Promise Yourself to talk to you about all the things that we're just not taught about at school. So whether or not that's mortgages, taxes, debts, savings, accounts, all this different stuff that we're just not taught about. And today I'm talking about alternatives to buying a house. Now, we all know that buying a house is quite expensive at the moment. In fact, the average first-time buyer house price at the moment is about around £260,000, which is a substantial amount of money. So this guy is going to go through some of the alternatives that are out there that can maybe save you a little bit of cash. The first one I'm going to talk about is actually mobile homes, or more specifically, van life. Now, I'm sure we've all seen the videos of people converting vans into mini houses, and while it may look like a pipe dream, it's actually much more realistic to get to that than it is to buy a house, because first of all, it's cheaper. It is a lot cheaper. Now, as you can imagine, second-hand van is a lot cheaper than a second-hand house. And then to convert that van, it often doesn't cost much more than between £5,000 to £8,000. So to buy a reasonable van and to then reasonably convert it into somewhere to live, the average is about £20,000. So don't be surprised if you're going for all high-end stuff, it could reach up to £60,000. So that completely depends on your taste. It's possible to do it very cheap. It's also possible to do it very expensive. It just depends what you want. But even the expensive option is cheaper than buying a house. Now, of course, with a van, it's mobile. You can drive around. It's just freedom. So you're not really tied to any one place. Whereas if, for example, you buy a house in, let's say, London, and then you decide you want to move up to Birmingham, don't know why you would, but maybe you do. So you have to buy the house in London to buy the house in Birmingham, otherwise you get locked in a chain because you can't afford to move your funds over and it's a whole big mess. Whereas with a van, you drive from London, you drive to Birmingham, you park up, and that's you moved. Now, vans also, obviously, it's going to be a little bit cheaper to run, and the bills, basically. The bills will be a bit cheaper because instead of paying for car insurance, house insurance, electricity bills, fuel, it's all going to be kept in one specific place. So your car insurance is your house insurance. You might have to get a bit better car insurance to cover all the stuff that you have in there. And then electricity bills, more often than not, vans have got solar panels on top to just keep the electricity ticking over. So you have that, which is going to take care of the electricity for you, theoretically. And then fuel, you're going to have to pay for fuel anyway if you have a car. So it should theoretically work out cheaper in bills unless you're going massively overboard with absolutely everything. Another advantage is vans that are being converted tend to hold their value pretty well. Now, it's not a guarantee, of course. It could go down in value and it could plummet quite fast, but generally they tend to hold their value quite well. So you have a little bit less to worry about there than if you were just buying a car, which normally would drop in value quite substantially quite quickly. Now, going on to the negatives. Now, of course, a van is smaller than a house. That means you have to live quite a minimalist lifestyle. You can't just throw everything into the van because you can't fit everything in the van. So you may have to give up certain luxuries. For example, some vans don't have showers. The chance of you fitting a bath in there, very slim. And then there's dishwashers, washing machines, all these things that maybe you won't be able to fit. Another thing that you have to be wary of is privacy. Now, within your little van, great, very private, just keep the windows closed, keep the doors closed, great, but it's not exactly going to be a massive space in there, so you won't be able to dance around your kitchen in your boxes because your kitchen will be approximately 1 meter squared. So if you want to have some privacy, obviously keep your doors closed, but that can be a little claustrophobic, so then you have to drive somewhere else so you could open the doors, and it wouldn't be great for those who like to be dancing around all the time constantly, unless of course you don't really care about what people see. Now, believe it or not, van life can be quite lonely as well. Now this is because you can't really have friends over. That's something that lots of people do. They all have friends over to the house, you have a party, you have a get together, whatever. You can't do that with a van. So chances are you might get a little bit lonely as you're traveling around in your van. Now, another disadvantage is, of course, the fact that the van's not going to rise in value. That is, unless you buy an old vintage van, that's definitely going to rise. But chances are it'll get a little bit lower slowly. Whereas with the property, it will generally increase in value. That's been the trend over the last few years. So if we assume that trend's going to keep going, your property values are going to keep rising. So you could lose a little bit of money there as well, with the fact that your van won't be keeping up with the inflation. Now, the last disadvantage is going to be keeping clean. As I said, you do have to forego some luxuries when you move into a van. For example, showers, baths. More often than not, the toilet isn't going to be especially advanced. So you may have to make some sacrifices if you are interested in living in a van. If you're a clean freak, chances are it's not going to be for you. But if you're not really too fussed, if you're not super conscious about keeping everything clean all the time, you want to wash your clothes every day, you should be able to get away with it. So again, it's completely personal choice. Now, the next alternative is just simply staying at home. Now, since 2010, the number of people aged 15 to 34 staying at home has increased by roughly 7%. So it's becoming more and more common for people to stay at home later and later in life. That's just obviously because the house prices are rising at such a rate that people can't afford to buy one. So it is an option. Obviously, you can't just decide you're going to live at home if your parents say you can't. You do have to discuss those kind of things. So just make sure that you know exactly what's going on. Make sure you talk to your parents, talk to friends, talk to family, because you don't always have to immediately move out of home straight into your own house. You can take steps in between, or you can just ask to stay at home a little bit longer. It's completely up to you. Like I said, I can't advocate for one option or the other, but whichever one you do decide to do, you have to make sure you talk it over with people first, because they may have different ways of seeing things to stop you from running headfirst into, well, a mistake. Now, the next option that you could consider is container homes. These are another growing trend in the UK. So basically, again, they are cheaper than buying a house. Instead of just buying the house, you buy a shipping container, which you can then plonk on a piece of land, turn into a home. That's the general theory behind them. Doesn't always work out that simple though, but let's go through the advantages first. So, first of all, containers are cheap. For a second-hand container, you're looking for a fairly abused one, around £1,200. For slightly newer ones in better shape, up to around £4,000. So a container is reasonably big and not crazy expensive. Secondly, they're modular. Now that means what can happen is they're very easy to just stick together. So as you want to keep building your home, you just add another container, another one on top, another one on top, on the sides. It doesn't matter. They stick together fairly nicely. So it's fairly easy to then expand your house or just have it slightly bigger in the first place. They are also very, very strong. They have been designed to withstand torment at seas. So they should theoretically last for a very long time for what they are. You wouldn't be surprised if you saw a container home standing 60 years after it was built. Considering for the cost, that's not too shabby. But of course, there are a few disadvantages. First of all, they're not very well insulated. They weren't designed for that, so you have to whack a whole load of insulation in there, which will eat into your space. Secondly, you have to cut holes in a container to, make it livable, have windows and doors and all that. And that really does damage the structural integrity of the container, so you may need to get a structural engineer in to start sorting that out. Also, they would have had all sorts of nasty chemicals inside when they're being shipped around the world to protect them. So those all have to be sandblasted off and properly cleaned. That shouldn't really be a problem because there are companies that can properly clean a container. So you shouldn't have to worry about that too much, but just make sure. And of course, there is land. You need land to put the container on, and land isn't cheap either. So just make sure you know exactly where you're going to put the container, because you may have to have planning permission on it as well. So again, it's not ideal. If you really want to go for a container home, do as much research as you can. There are great articles out there that tell you the pros and the cons, and if done properly, they can be a wonderful place to live, but just make sure you know what you're doing first. Now, the final option you have is building your own house. Now again, you have the problem with the buying the land, so you actually have the place to build the house, and also planning permission, but we're not going to delve too much into those at the moment, because those are just big issues that you're going to have pretty much doing anything. So instead, I'm going to talk about what's good about building a house, what's bad about building a house. Now, the good stuff. Obviously, it is cheaper to build than it is to buy. Because that way you can source all your own materials, you can hire the cheapest people or the best people to do the work for you. You can even do some of the work yourself if you're feeling confident. So you're sourcing all your stuff, you can actually take charge and make sure that you're not going over budget. Also, you can have the house how you want it. You have a bit more freedom. You can design one room to be one way, one room to be another. You can have a massive living room and tiny bedrooms, or the other way around. It's completely up to you how you want to have your house. You are designing it, obviously, in tandem with a designer or an architect, just to make sure that it is structurally sound. But it is possible to have it your own, to your own preference. Now, if we go on to some disadvantages, like I said, you need the land, but also it's cheaper than buying, but it's still not cheap. In fact, per square metre, you can expect to spend between £1,200 to £3,000 just for that square metre when you're building a house. It's not a cheap thing to do. Now, on top of actually building a house, there's going to be extra fees. There's legal fees, there's administration fees. You have to pay architects and builders and all sorts. So again, still not going to be cheap. And of course, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. That's another good thing about container homes. They can be up very, very, very quickly in a matter of weeks. Whereas building a house is going to take a while. It's not something that you can just snap your fingers and make happen. So you have to plan quite far in the future when you're trying to build a house. Now, hopefully this video has helped you. There's loads of different options out there on top of these that you can have a look into as well. So just make sure you're doing your research when you are thinking of moving out, because really you need to know what you can actually afford, what you need to do, and whether you actually want to do it. So just make sure you know what you want and do your research so you know what's going on. That's the most important thing. So long as you're well educated on this, you can make an educated decision, and that just saves time and hassle for everyone. My name's Ben Walker. Hopefully you've learned something here today, and I'll see you again soon.